Welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses, and the race for third place is hotting up as we enter the final week of the season. Final 2 weeks technically, but by the time the Hearts game comes around, it's the final week, so you know what I mean. Anyway, this is about as chaotic as the Aberdeen defence was on Saturday, so a solid start. Calum, the game maybe didn't live up to the hype of the pre-match excitement.
It was absolutely awful. It was terrible. We were so bad. It was unbelievable. Um, I suppose sometimes, when we go into games like that, sort of Michael kind of alluded to it. Would we be able to live up to the sort of expectation with the big crowd and all the sort of all the stuff going around the Gothenburg greats and stuff like that? And yeah, we absolutely did not live up to the hype. And I've seen a few people on Twitter saying, let's just never have a sellout again because they're always a letdown. I mean, it was similar when Fergie came up, sort of his homecoming, 1-1 draw, Dundee United, I believe it was. So
Yeah, that's exactly what Ian said to me on the way home on Saturday. He turned around and he said that the last time we had the sellout, of course, was that Fergie game, which was about as flat as a pancake as well on the pitch. But I suppose we've got to tip our hats to Ultras Aberdeen for what was a fantastic display from both the Merkland and RDS sides, and really good to see Pittodrie full by 2:45 and giving the Gothenburg greats that heroes welcome onto the pitch, of course, with the 40th anniversary and what's been a week of celebrating for them. They had the dinner at the Markcliffe on the Thursday, the Freedom of the City ceremony on the Friday, which admittedly I ended up falling asleep halfway through. My hangover caught with me. But yeah, just great for them to, be able to catch up, reminisce, and for us as fans be able to celebrate them as well. And did you watch both the documentaries, the BBC one and the Sky one, or just one of them so far?
I've not watched the Sky one yet. Watched the
No,
BBC
neither.
one with my dad. We had a dram whilst we were doing it. I thought he wasn't going to have it, and I was like, "Come on, it's 40 years. It'll be a nice moment." And thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought the BBC one was absolutely brilliant. Like I said, not seen the Sky one yet, but I felt a very fitting tribute. You feel like, and all of it was, and it was just absolutely what a day. Every time something popped up relating to Gothenburg on my Twitter, I was just watching it, retweeting it, loving it. It was brilliant. Carried on into Saturday. My dad wore the same jacket that he was wearing in Gothenburg 40 years ago to the game. It doesn't quite fit him as well, and he took his Peter Weir banner to the game as well. I was like, I don't really know why, but we tried to unfurl it, hold it. Don't know how easy it was to read or of any whatsoever, but I thought it was just a nice moment. Shame the football didn't live up to all of the expectation, though.
No, absolutely not. But we've found out as well on Thursday night that one of the Gothenburg greats does tune into this podcast. Neil Simpson, fan of the show, rank him up there with Duke as star listeners. So good to see more folk from the club tuning in. Maybe Neil might be tuning off quite quickly when we become critical of the football, but more on a topic that probably does affect Neil's job later on in the show when we discuss the club rejecting the B team proposal. But we'll speak about the game itself, and it was an unchanged 11 as we probably predicted, with Ross McCrory continuing to miss out after his hernia operation. But we spoke, Calum, in the start of the season about us starting games poorly under Jim Goodwin, and that was as poor as anything we've seen from both Jim Goodwin's time, let alone Barry Robson's time.
And it didn't get any better whatsoever. And I was sort of a little bit concerned once again with Coulson being at right wing back, naturally left-footed, left wing back, left winger. Perhaps you might even put him in that category. And certainly going up against Ellie Yuan, and I think that sort of showed, how uncomfortable he was in that position when you've got a player like that, probably buoyed by the fact he's staying at Hibs permanently. I particularly thought he struggled, not really through much fault of his own, I suppose, being in an uncomfortable position, but we were just poor throughout. It didn't get any better as the game went on at all. And I was very, very concerned at times as well. They had plenty of chances. But thankfully, I suppose we got out of there with a point. I don't know if it was a good point, however. A few people have been saying that. I wasn't sure if I would agree. I just think glad that we didn't lose sort of any ground in terms of the race for third, I guess.
Yeah, I think, in terms of was it a good point, I think given the context of the game, it's an excellent point because there was absolutely no way we deserved anything from the game. I think, anyone suggesting that we did deserve something from that game, I mean, you've got even red tinted glasses than we do.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, that could be a huge point in terms of the race for third. I think why it probably feels more disappointing is the fact that Hearts drop points away at St Mirren, which is, when you see them grabbing a last minute equaliser, it hurts because you're knowing that if we'd won, we'd have been oh so close to securing that third place and all the benefits that come with it as well. But look, it's still in our own hands. We've still got the pack need to chase us, and even worst case scenario, losing at Tynecastle still keeps it in our own hands. Makes it a little bit harder, admittedly, but so we'll look into that more. But on Hayden Coulson, of course, you picked up, and so did Sports Scene as well, about his kind of struggles at right back, obviously being more natural to the left side. But one thing I didn't think that helped him at all first half, but became to me more evident in the second half, was he was getting no support from whoever was supposed to be the right midfielder. I don't know in the first half if it was Dukes. He normally plays on the south stand side when we're attacking the red shed. So I'm not sure who was right midfield, right wing in that first half, but certainly in the second half, I mean, obviously Duke went off midway through, but even when he was replaced, I felt Hayden was being very badly exposed, and laterally, of course, Jaden Richardson as well. There was no defensive cover on that right side.
No, it wasn't good at all. I mean, I sort of singled out Hayden there. Could single out any of them for their performance, essentially, other than Kelle Roos and perhaps Angus MacDonald as well. You could maybe say I thought Pollock was poor as well, which probably didn't help Coulson, given he was on his side too, and obviously in behind. It was. I don't know what was going on. I mean, Barry Robson said afterwards, at least the one thing you can do is make sure you don't lose the game when you play that badly. We were very lucky not to. Apparently, Hibs had more shots than they did when they beat us 6-0, which is a bit of a concern. But and a lot of it was down to the fantastic man between the sticks, who, by the way, for all the negativity that's perhaps going to be in this episode, has been phenomenal since coming back from injury. And I think it sort of summed it up with that penalty save as well, which was celebrated like a goal in the end.
Yeah, it was. One of the girls from works in Bridget Dawn, and she said she could hear the roar from Bridget Dawn. She thought we'd actually scored. But that just shows the importance of that save to the context of the game as well as our season. But yeah, a lot of players, as you said, probably don't deserve pass marks out of the two that you met, other than the two you mentioned, apologies. And it was a game that really lacked any sort of composure, I think was the word that we used at the game. Again, whether the occasion got to us, but I don't know about you, but the pre-match build-up and everything around the game, the game I felt kind of had that, it was almost the last day of the season vibes to it. Everyone was in, everyone was excited, sun was shining, it was a glorious day, but a mixture of that, but also, pre-season first day of the season vibes to it. It didn't really have that this is a huge game in the context of both teams' season.
No, and I mean, you said composure there. We certainly lacked that throughout. And perhaps you've obviously Hibs maybe lacked that in front of goal as well, with the fact so many chances, didn't manage to take any of them. It was chaotic. Our passing was particularly terrible. And I remember Johnny Hayes just continuously giving the ball away. Unfortunately, I think the occasion must have got to them and definitely had an off day. But let's hope that is our off day going towards the back end of the season. That's it, and we'll get that out of our system now, because as it didn't. We're still in the same spot as we were at 3 p.m. on Saturday, so that's okay. However, you mentioned it earlier, it did feel like an absolute kick in the stones. Hearts equalising, because I would have been delighted with a point regardless of the performance if we'd somehow managed to widen the gap, which unfortunately we didn't. So that really felt like a sick night. I think it just made me feel even worse about it all. I was not happy. It was absolutely atrocious. The passing was so slack. You mentioned that there was 2 shots on target. Apparently, I mean, I
Yeah.
remember Marshall saving a deflected one. Other than that, I don't remember it. Barely had a thing to do. And when he's been suspect, we highlighted it going into the game, and we barely tested him.
Yeah, no, we was discussing that pre-recordings, and the stats was that we had eight shots, 2 on target. The only chance that I was like, oh, we'll probably have to speak about that on the podcast was the chance in the 44th minute when Hayden Coulson, again, man, that's going to get a lot of discussion on this episode, had probably our best attempt of the game, or most clear cut attempt, and with the greatest respect to Hayden, probably the one player you don't want the attempt falling to. And I think it was on his weaker foot as well, and on his right side. I'm sure he took that shot with. But yeah, I don't even remember any of the shots on target, let alone the deflected one that you mentioned. And again, I think that for me was a big disappointment. Not testing a goalkeeper that we'd highlighted, as you say in the preview, that has been prone to making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly Hibs were very wasteful with all their opportunities, but as well as being wasteful, Kelle was there making some vital stops. But I think you're right in terms of the right side of our defence. That was probably Matty Pollock's poorest game for us. Whether that was down to having to do a lot of work in helping Hayden, I'm not sure. I actually didn't think Liam Scales also had his best game either. I thought he looked poor at times as well. It was just thank God for Angus MacDonald with his last-ditch blocks that he makes. And to be honest, even the passing that you mentioned, Johnny Hayes was poor. I thought Yilbur Ramadani was awful. I don't know what it is about Yilbur. He likes winning the ball, but then takes 5 or 6 touches too many. Dilly-dallies on the ball far too often in situations where a hoof up the park would suffice. And there was a couple of times where it nearly led to us conceding. And I think, on days like Saturday, those little mistakes get highlighted even further when everyone else in red's struggling.
Absolutely. And Yilbur, you're correct to mention him. We're big fans of Yilbur on the show, but I think he had a very poor game. Clarkson wasn't on the ball enough either. Ramadani, I remember at one particular point, I think Jaden Richardson was on by this point. It's definitely heading towards the end of the game. It might have even been added time. And he was sort of wide open on the right. And Yilbur was dilly-dallying, took, I say, a few too many touches, and then lost the ball. And they could have been in. If I can't remember what happened exactly. Maybe he recovered. But it was so poor and not like him at all.
Yeah, because there was another one where Matty Pollock, I think it was a bit of a hospital pass from Matty, but Yilbur controls it, but then wants to take an extra couple of touches, gets dispossessed, and Hibs going on goal, and I think it ends up going out for a corner, which actually might have been the corner that led to the penalty. But there was just too many times where either players wanted too much time on the ball or just didn't kind of get rid of it. It just, to be honest, Sports Scene summed it up perfectly, because it's how I felt at the game. We were giving away such avoidable, such cheap goals under Jim Goodwin. That, from a lot of the players, was a Jim Goodwin type performance. Just players looking lost, looking unsure. And, I've got no doubt that Barry Robson will have been furious with that performance that was served up. And I think that's, for me, the only encouraging thing, that Barry Robson will not want a repeat of that when we go down to Edinburgh on Saturday lunchtime.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, particularly in the first half as well, they weren't being sort of brave enough on the ball. It seemed to be when we did win the ball back after a Hibs attack or whatever, we got rid of it so quickly. And Robson highlighted it previously, like trying to be too quick on the transition. But there was no one brave enough to, take. We've criticised them for taking too many touches, but take the touch, get their head up, and look to see what we can do rather than just punting it up. There was no one brave enough to do that. And you're probably looking at Clarkson to be that guy, but it wasn't his game either. And Ryan Duncan as well struggled again, you would say.
Well, I wasn't going to mention it, but it becomes, again, players like Ryan Duncan and I think, Leighton Clarkson. But you maybe need to give Hibs a bit of credit for the work that they did in midfield, because they, Harry didn't give us that time on the ball, which we've been accustomed to at home. So the likes of Leighton Clarkson couldn't get that influence into the game. But again, unfortunately for a player like Ryan Duncan, it just didn't click for him. But it's not as much as a criticism of him this week compared to last, because, as you said, there's only about 2 players that we can give pass marks to from this weekend. But I think as well, my concern from this weekend, there was a couple of big highlights, was how much we miss Ross McCrory. If you didn't think we missed him, or don't think we'll miss him next season, I think Saturday just shows how big a miss Ross could be. But also that squad depth that I was speaking about, with Barry Robson being reluctant to, maybe utilise his bench. I think we saw on Saturday why he's been reluctant to use his bench.
Possibly. One I will give credit to, however, Jayden Richardson, I actually thought he came on and did okay. He seemed to deal with things a bit better. I think he also looked a bit more bulky, he looked a bit more up for it.
Yeah.
Which I presumably has been a lot of what he's been working on in his time out the team. If he came in to start against Hearts, I wouldn't be too against it. And the fact he actually came on at all was probably a surprise. Marcandi, I mean, he's thrown in a chance, when he's barely kicked a ball since January, since coming in. Probably doesn't help. And Shaden Morris working his way back from injury too.
Yeah,
a little to nothing to note from him, and Marley Watkins as well. I mean, yeah, none of that was fantastic. But you say need to give credit to Hibs. We absolutely do. If we'd lost that game 3-0, I mean, you couldn't say it was unjust, really, could you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As Michael said in his tweet post-match, it was unbelievable how they didn't win that game, and says it was pretty remarkable. But one player that, as well as most of the rest of the team, that was struggling in that first half and subsequently went off in the second with what looks to be a hamstring, potentially season-ending injury, was Duke. Now, a few folk, including Stu, at the game, pointed out how he looked very kind of tender during the game. He didn't look fully fit. I don't know if that's something you noticed from the South Stand. I certainly never noticed it, because sometimes he does look like he's struggling with a little bit of an injury, but then the next thing, the ball's over the top and he's running full pelt and there's nothing ever wrong. Do you think he's maybe played through that injury and just tried to see out the game?
Possibly, but I don't think he should have, because he ended up going off after pulling up, which thankfully it didn't look awful, and he watched the game from the tunnel at the end. So hopefully he'd be fit to start at Hearts. I highly doubt he will be, though. But it's been a few weeks. I think he's kind of looked like that. I remember up at Ross County, he was well off the mark. And yeah. Was that the game he came back from Cape Verde after like 48 hours before, I think?
Yeah, no, that was not a home game.
Possibly. But anyway, regardless, it looks like he's sort of struggled since about then. So whether he's been trying to play through a little tweak, possibly, and it sort of went, and I just hope that we see him again before the end of the season, even if it's not at Tynecastle. The game against St Mirren at Pittodrie, potentially massive. So we need him back. Whether he will be, I don't know. But can you trust Shaden Morris perhaps to come back in and then fill the void, Glenn?
Yeah, I don't know, but again, I suppose this is where that, also that extra game that Graeme Shinnie's picked up a ban on now, with how Saturday's looking, becomes even more frustrating, missing the likes of Duke, because I do get that feeling that on Saturday Ramadani had to pick up a lot of the dirty work. Maybe he's feeling a bit of that pressure without Graeme Shinnie in there that can, sweep up and help him out there, because obviously Leighton Clarkson's being asked to do a different role. So yeah, I'm not as confident for certainly Saturday as I was based on what we saw at the weekend. And the second half, the first half we were definitely lucky to be going in at half time. I've never been so happy to hear the halftime whistle at Pittodrie, clinging on to that 0-0. But the second half was, I mean, really, it's unbelievable how we're sitting here speaking about how we didn't see a red card brandished. Once again, Nick Walsh at the centre of controversy around VAR, Josh Campbell's high boot connected square in the face of Liam Scales, flattening him. And the one thing that angers me most about this incident is that Nick Walsh goes straight to his top pocket and then just absolutely shits the bed and decides, nah, I'm not actually going to take this out. Now, whether or not that was because he was waiting to see what the injury was, I still don't think that's right. But then obviously we get the announcement on the stadium tannoy to say that there's a VAR check taking place for a possible red card. Now, Nick Walsh hasn't brandished any card, so he is now being fully aided by VAR in his decision-making, which is completely wrong and completely not how VAR is supposed to be used. Surely in that situation, he should have been guided to the monitor to say, have a second look and see what you think is the best course of action. We think it's a yellow, but why don't you take a look? Compare that to what Peter Haring got sent off for, which I'm sure we'll be discussing in the preview for the Hearts game. It's remarkable that we're speaking about him being sent off and Josh Campbell speaking only about getting a yellow.
It's mental. At the time, I didn't notice Walsh going to his top pocket and then sort of hesitating. I also wasn't sure with what he made contact. Campbell made contact with. I thought he'd maybe managed to pull out before going studs up into Scales up her body. So that wasn't the case. I can't believe, I'm seeing it back, that they've not had him go and look at it again, because it's a red card all day long. And you think about the red cards that we've seen in recent weeks. I mean, you mentioned the Haring one. Also with Hearts, you've got the Cochrane one, which is contentious. James Jeggo was sent off and then it was rescinded. And then there's the Shinnie one. And there's probably more in recent times as well that I'm forgetting. And yet that's the clearest red card of the lot. And it's not been given. He's not been told to look at the monitor. I don't have a clue what... I honestly don't know anymore. I'm not surprised that the people in charge they're awful. They're useless at their job.
And it's no wonder that the fans are getting fed up as well. And that's the thing, because when Nick Walsh was going over, he goes into his, the chest pocket. So I'm thinking, right, he's going to brandish the red. And as soon as VAR, he's in his, pocket in his shorts. And that's obviously where he keeps his yellow card. I just can't believe he's absolutely bottled, making his own mind up and has been influenced. And whether or not, you obviously mentioned the Alex Cochrane decision. Of course, Nick Walsh was the referee in charge last week when his booking of Alex Cochrane was upgraded to a red card. So whether or not his mind's been, still going back to that incident and he doesn't want to almost get it wrong 2 weeks in a row, but he has, and he's shite-bagged it at the end. There's no other word for it, and it's just incredibly infuriating. You've listed some of the incidents there, but the Shinnie for us, the Duke penalty incident at Ibrox last week, I noticed Bobby Madden was back on Sports Sound speaking to Kenny McIntyre. Bobby admitting that it should have been a free kick and Connor Goldson should have received a red card, and he doesn't know why VAR didn't get involved in that situation. You look at the onside offside that we had at Ross County as well, the very dodgy camera angle. Whether or not you want to believe in conspiracies within the SFA against awarding Rangers a penalty, could certainly build a conspiracy case about the SFA trying their best to prevent us finishing third.
They don't want to see us win. I said it a few weeks ago. They don't want to see us win. Hopefully, we will prevail against all odds, certainly in refereeing terms. There's probably going to be more talking points between now and the end of the season. And when it's such an exciting time at the end of the season, look at all the bottom split games basically matter. You've got 4 teams vying for European spots, and yet this is what we're talking about again. Yeah. It's not right.
Yeah. No, it's not right, and it's just, I've got this horrible feeling that, we've got 2 huge games coming up and we're going to be probably speaking about VAR's involvement one way or another in these games. And that's not how you want your season defined for what could be a huge reward in terms of us at the top end of the table, or as you've mentioned with those relegation games, having a lot riding it on it. I mean, funny if it happened to Dundee United, admittedly, but potentially losing the Mallard due to a VAR decision would be heartbreaking.
It would be, and say going into our final games of the season, by the nailed on penalty next week for Hearts, guaranteed, Shankland sticking one away.
Well, hopefully Kelle Roos can perform more heroics like he did at the weekend. But before then, we didn't half ride our luck. Ellie Yuan smashing the post early on in the second half, and then pinging the crossbar as well. And I can't remember, was it from the follow-up from him hitting the crossbar that Harry McCurdy then smacked the post? And once again, the fans inside Pittodrie were subjected to a long VAR wait. And, we could only think it was handball. Where that handball came, I had no idea until going back and watching Sports Scene on Sunday morning. And what a save, Hayden Coulson. And thank God for his elbow, because had it not deflected off his elbow, I think it's safe to say that would have found the back of the net.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, we can't complain about VAR's intervention.
No, and weirdly enough, immediately after that happened, I was like, "Oh no!" And so was Nathan next to me. We were like, "That looked a little bit sus," but Nathan was convinced that Hayden Coulson's arms were right tucked in, so it would have been fine. Unfortunately, an elbow sticking out. Well, actually, fortunately, an elbow sticking out. For the criticism we gave Hayden Coulson earlier in the show, absolutely brilliant from you, mate. Stopped a certain goal from a man that we had been slagging off in the preview to the Hibs game. So I'm glad that he didn't score. And then Kelle Roos pops up. Fantastic double save, and it worked out in our favour. Has to be said, though, what an awful penalty that was from Nisbet. Because if he even lifts it, if he goes in the middle and lifts it a little bit, Roos doesn't say that with his feet. But it sort of sums up both ours and Hibs Day in terms of they couldn't finish their dinner, and we had Kelle Roos to thank a lot for.
Yeah, and we also had Angus MacDonald to thank as well, because I thought he was going to join Duke on the injury list with the way he almost sacrificed his knee in terms of blocking an attempt from Hibs in that second half. But also to credit Kelle Roos, not only for the save, but keeping his foot, which I think actually saves the penalty, on the line. Because there was a lot of Hibs tears about the fact that when in the last game at Pittodrie, when Bojan Miovski had to retake the penalty from David Marshall's save. But of course, if you don't have your feet on the line, it means it's a retake. You saw that in the St Johnstone Motherwell game when Remy Matthews initially saved Van Veen's penalty, but he with both feet off the line. So really good goalkeeping from Kelle Roos, not just in his awareness of his positioning, but also to then follow up with the save and get a good foot behind it. It's normally good wrist behind it, but a good foot behind it to get distance on it. And we then scrambled like we had to do most of the day, the danger away.
Yeah, I mean, he leathered it, to be fair to him.
Yeah.
So for me, that was absolutely the highlight of the game for us, which, it doesn't really say much other than the Simmy's mince and Tate's pie, which was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Also had Scully in it, which was delicious. And I actually managed to get one, so credit to the kiosk staff for that. And also, when that penalty was saved, a Hibs fan attempting to launch a drink over the fence. To be fair, it was from quite far into the away end, but he didn't clear the fence, and it landed about 3 people into the Hibs section and just nailed one of them. So those are my highlights of the game. Those 3, which doesn't really say much.
No, it doesn't, but the people will be delighted to hear your pie review because it's been missed for a few weeks. So good to hear it got rave review, and I'm sure any of the club staff listening will be delighted to hear that you're finally content with the kiosk staff as well.
Yes, yes.
All the important matters covered on this podcast, don't forget. Barry Robson said in his post-match press conference that he gave the players up to now a 7 out of 10 in terms of performances for him. It's been 7 and upwards was his words. But he also includes Saturday as a 7 out of 10. As Billy Dodd said on Sports Scene, I'd love him to be judging me because that was a very generous 7 out of 10.
Oh, it was, yeah. I mean, McDonald probably gets a 7. Roos probably gets a 10. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think if that's what he's meaning, then absolutely fine by me. But the rest of them, I mean, probably struggling for a 5. It wasn't fantastic. Up to now, yes. Saturday's game not included, but
I suppose for context of it though, he probably means the fact that his interview on Red TV where he said that the players continued despite not playing well, despite the performance not being the best, they continued to fight for the club, they continued to fight for the city. The players didn't give up, and for me that was the biggest takeaway because going back as far as January, we would have 100% lost that game
Yeah.
under certainly the last manager, if not the one before him as well. The team does have that bit of fight about it, and I think Billy Dodds made that good point on Sports Scene as well by saying that, if you're not going to play at your best, because you can't always beat your best, make sure you're hard to beat. I wouldn't have said we made ourselves hard to beat. I thought we gave Hibs plenty of opportunities, but look, we didn't concede, and at 0-0, it does just take a second to score. So we kept the ball out of the net, and it's just unfortunate that we didn't perform really in the final third either this weekend.
No, I mean, Miovski, I can barely remember a touch he had because the service up to him was just non-existent. But yeah, I will give them the credit that we absolutely would have lost that as a few months ago. I think that maybe shows sort of where we've come from, I suppose. Although the fact we did give up a lot of chances, that certainly helped that Hibs were a little bit wasteful. You could probably say unlucky, certainly in McCurdy's case. But to go from losing 6-0 to that side,
yeah,
0-0, and we're still 5 points clear in third, we'll take it regardless of how critical we've been, or I've been.
But then in making that point that you've just said then about how far we've come, does that also show how far we've come, the fact that we're sitting here almost annoyed that we've only drawn with that Hibs side, and given the context of the weekend results, that we've almost set ourselves such a high standard that one little slip, fans are getting frustrated at. It's not that we're, turning on the manager that some people maybe want to say as well. It's just that's that high standard that Barry has set, one slip below that, and we do get annoyed. It's such a critical point of the season.
Well, I mean, when the split fixtures came out, we were saying win our home games should be fine, and it's not like we were unlucky to not win the game. We were very bad. Look, they are allowed an off day, but we were. It doesn't get in the way of the facts. We were very, very bad. So the fact we didn't lose the game is progress, I suppose. Again, even though we were perhaps lucky in that case, but improvement needed, and hopefully Barry will have some boots up the arse, not given any more injuries, because we could be struggling to field the team at this rate. But I can imagine he's going to be working very hard in the training session to improve on that Hibs result. Although he's come out and said, they've been very good to the press and things like that, 7s, 10s out of 10s, whatever. I'm sure he will, behind closed doors, will be making sure that sort of performance doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I think though that's another a point you make there. Just kind of reminded me, if you listen to the press conferences from our former manager, who was quite quick to throw players under the bus. I quite like this approach from Barry Robson, where it's quite level-headed, maybe taking the responsibility on his own shoulders, willing to accept that things weren't right, but not, we didn't do well enough. The midfield could have done better. The strikers needed to get into better space. There was nobody was getting thrown under the bus. There seems to be, that team togetherness, and Barry will take the hit, and he's almost protecting the players from any flack that fans, podcasters, media want to give him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and that's one of the things I like about Barry. So let's just hope, though, that, as I said, he will be making sure that doesn't happen again, because a very big game coming up.
Yeah, huge game, but no ground has been lost. So, look, sitting pretty, third is still in our hands. And before we move on to the preview of the Hearts game, there was a statement. We're recording this on Monday evening. The club came out with a statement this afternoon, or this morning it was, formally rejecting their invite to the Conference League proposals, because the club are in favour of the development of young players into the first team, and also continuing to utilise the loan path that they've been using this season. I know there's definitely staff and people behind the scenes at Pittodrie who are dead against this. So it's good that they've been listened to, but also the fans' opinions have also been listened to. Certainly when you read into it more about the club having to pay £100,000 just to enter, and that would be a yearly fee. And Alan Burrows in his statement saying that we'd need a player pool of about 55, and I think was it £400,000 a year extra. I think it's wise that the club have rejected this decision, and we can focus on putting players out on loan. And Calum, I noticed as well, Alan Burrows mentioning potentially looking into strategic partnerships. I'm sure a better strategic partner than we've got with Atlanta, of course.
Yes, I mean, I was sort of kind of like, well, if other teams are doing it, maybe it can benefit us. Before, and you informed me actually more kind of on what the whole structure and what it would mean for other clubs and things like that. So I am glad that we have come out with that statement. Hopefully other teams will follow suit as well, because having learned about it, it is a ridiculous notion. And also, you mentioned the strategic partnerships. I think that would be certainly beneficial. I mean, in the Northeast, depending on what you want to consider as the Northeast, you'll have teams all across. You've got Arbroath in the Championship, you'll have Cove in League One, Elgin City League Two, Peterhead League Two, as well as Forfar Highland League with Brecon. Plenty of teams across plenty levels that we can potentially have our players out there close enough that they can still train with us as well, because these teams, a lot of them part-time. Make use of that, and also it helps them in terms of recruitment, because it's not easy at that level, and our players go and play against professionals that perhaps played at a high level, drop down, very experienced, and can be very beneficial in terms of coming into the first team as well. So yeah, 2 fingers to the proposal from me.
Good. But we'll be back to speaking about on the pitch action, because coming up on the show now, Graeme Duthie joins us to preview the weekend's huge clash in Edinburgh as the Dons travel to Tynecastle to take on Heart of Midlothian. Graeme, welcome along to Red Tinted Glasses, of course, making your debut on our podcast, but we've worked together on State of Scottish Football before, and you now host your own Hearts podcast, the Heart and Soul podcast, for any Hearts fans tuning in. How are you doing, Graeme?
I'm doing well, mate. Thanks for having me on. Good to be on with yourself and Calum.
Yeah, no, good to be back discussing Scottish football with you as well. Normally, it's all aspects of Scottish football we're used to discussing, but of course, we've got a huge game this weekend to preview as the race for third really heats up. We'll be getting your thoughts, of course, on all things Hearts, but me and Calum will be inputting our thoughts on all things Aberdeen. Calum, as we've said in the first part of the show, we're recording this on Monday evening. What's your initial thoughts at the moment looking ahead to the weekend's game? Fear, dread, excitement, or are you wishing you were going to Beyonce instead?
I'd probably rather Beyonce. I've not managed to get a ticket for the game, so if anyone
or Beyonce,
neither. So if someone wants to meet up with either, then get in the comments down below and let me know, or Twitter, Calum Wright 2. I am terrified about watching the game because I'm just dreading. I mean, after that performance against Hibs, after our last game at Tynecastle, which I was at, and also I'll be watching it with one of my best friends who is a Hearts fan. So it'll either end in I'll be yelling in his face or he'll be yelling in mine, and I'm dreading the latter because he's a right annoying prick. So we'll see how it goes.
Although I suppose that last part is subject to you getting a ticket or not. But Graeme, from a Hearts point of view, then how's the feeling on the maroon side of Edinburgh going into this weekend? Because it's not been the best start to the post-split fixtures. Obviously, the first game against Celtic ended in defeat. You had the controversy of the red card to Cochrane. And then probably a very disappointing 2-2 draw at the weekend, although maybe some Hearts fans feel that there's been a bit of momentum gained by the fact that you battled so well to come back from 2-0 down.
Yeah, I mean, our form after splits are never that good anyway, so I wasn't really massively surprised. We weren't great last season, but we'd already had third wrapped up and we were in the cup final, so it didn't really matter. But this season it's been frustrating. I had said in a couple of group chats that I'm with my Hearts fans, if I was to score the season out of 10, I'd give it a 6. I don't think it's been particularly great. I don't think it's particularly bad. It's just been very average. Been some decent performances, some horrendous performances, the whole Robert Nielsen thing, the injuries, all that kind of stuff as well. It's not been overly great. And I think if I'd been offered at the start of the season 4th place, I probably wouldn't have taken it because we had to get 3rd place. And for a long time, after the World Cup, it looked like we were going to get that. After we beat Aberdeen 5-0, went on a great run, and then it just fell apart. The whole Robert Nielsen thing. And it was, you get these so-called pundits and it was a terrible decision. No, it wasn't. If you've watched Hearts this season, you will know that was not a poor decision to sack him. But yeah, it's been very frustrating. There has been signs under Naismith that he's trying to get a different kind of mentality. The Ross County game and the Celtic game were better performances. Even the Celtic game, I thought we were competitive and we played in the front foot, but our away form has been terrible. That first half on Saturday, we should have been 3 or 4 down. Again, our inability to defend set pieces is going to be what kills us. Aberdeen game on Saturday does worry me because I said weeks ago, I think 3rd's probably done. And I think the game that did it was Aberdeen beating Rangers. I never want Rangers to win. I did that weekend. And what did they do? They ruined it for me. But yeah, that game for me just completely killed it. Had Aberdeen lost that game, I might have had a chance. But we've got to potentially win our next 3 games. We have to go to Ibrox so we don't win. So it's going to be a very, very difficult game. Hopefully Duke is out. That might be a positive. But I just want to see us playing the front foot again. The 2 games at home that he's had so far have been very impressive and very encouraging. He has played basically a front 4. I think Oda has actually been very impressive. Janelli's been really good. So we have that threat, but defensively, it still is a worry for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, hearing you speak about that because there are obviously some still problems at Hearts just now that, will probably look to be rectified in the summer. But I think, Calum, hearing Graeme judge Hearts currently being 4th as a 6 out of 10 in terms of their season is quite telling because of, we're often judged as being very critical, and maybe some people think Hearts are being critical as well. But when Liam Corbett was on the podcast last, we mentioned about the kind of European hangover and how that always seemed to catch up with us in the split as well. And maybe that's something that Hearts are still feeling the effect of. But the one point that Graeme made that I really kind of agree on was that how vital that victory at Pittodrie over Rangers could be, because not only did it enhance our own feeling of finishing 3rd, maybe the players as well, but it really seemed to knock the stuffing out of Hearts' support. And whether it's maybe knocked the stuffing out of their players, I guess time will tell this weekend.
Yeah, quite possibly, because I believe that weekend Hearts beat Ross County 6-1. Was that weekend?
Yeah.
And then we played the Sunday, knowing that result, the gap closed to 2 temporarily. Going into that game against Rangers, given what happened the last time at Pittodrie, and I wasn't sure. There was a little bit of confidence there, but the fact we managed to come out with that 2-0 victors, extending the gap up to 5 again, when a lot of Hearts fans probably were hoping, thinking, if we get a result against Ross County, which they did, Aberdeen have got Rangers to play, and you never know what can happen there. But I think we learned a lot about the team there. We had been on a good run of form, and we knew the game for a long part of the season might have had a big bearing on the season, given Rangers right before the split. We thought maybe relying on it to get into top 6, however. And maybe it did knock something out of Hearts, because thinking, it probably emphasised that it is a very different team now that we've got, given since the last time we played at Tynecastle anyway.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned, Graeme, that you've got to go to Ibrox and you never win at Ibrox. Well, the way I feel about this season just now is that everything seems to be going against us in certain aspects. So I'm sure your big brothers will be happily doing you a favour, since their season means fuck all now, that they won their cup final at the weekend. But of course, Stephen Naismith in charge at Tynecastle now. Were you happy to see him take the reins on a temporary charge?
Temporary, yes. Permanent, no. And I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks. I want a more experienced manager in. And I put a poll out on my Twitter yesterday, basically saying Naismith permanent, yes or no. And 67% said no. So that basically tells you all you need to know. Most Hearts fans, there are some Hearts fans that say, yeah, give him a chance. For me, it's too big for him. Now, Barry Robson's had an experience of doing this before. He's done a very good job. I just think Naismith, for me, is just too inexperienced. Some people said he might not want the job. I think he does. if he's offered it, he'll take it. He's not turning that down.
No.
But I want more experience in there. Next season, even if we were to finish fourth, it's still European football. It's not guaranteed group stage football, but he's going to have to juggle domestic football, European football, cup football. For me, I don't want him permanently. Happy for him to get the job temporarily till the end of the season, but I don't want him permanently. I want somebody else in after the season's finished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think Calum, maybe draws similarities to where we were when Barry first took over at Aberdeen, thinking we want somebody more experienced. But, Stephen Naismith's not really had that new manager bounce that Barry Robson did in, suppose, transforming where we were. So you can kind of understand why Hearts fans feel like that just now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I basically said the same thing on here that the Graeme just said. I said about Robson, and happy to have it into the end of the season. Then things started going really well. We were basically given no choice because he couldn't stop winning. On the flip side of the coin, Naismith, unfortunately for Hearts, hasn't done that. Fortunately for us, so I certainly sympathise in that. And had Robson, done well, ended up finishing fourth, which obviously is still possible. But he hadn't been announced permanent charge, you would maybe be in the same spot looking, you do want someone else more experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, that's not the case. And Barry Robson's brilliant, so it's all right.
Yeah, it's all right. And he'll be even more brilliant if he can mastermind 3 points this weekend, which would, of course, secure the Dons' third place in the Scottish Premiership this season. And you'd like to think group stage football as well, barring an absolute unbelievable score in the Scottish Cup final. But one place where I do feel the game could be won or lost this weekend, Graeme, you mentioned it as well, Hearts' current Achilles heel is set pieces. Now, whilst Duke may or may not be fit enough for the weekend, one part of the field where we have become more threatening this season has, of course, been set pieces. We've got the height of Matty Pollock, Angus MacDonald, Liam Scales in there now as well. And most of the time, Leighton Clarkson can deliver a good ball or hit a good free kick. I know, Graeme, you're also a fan of Liverpool and an admirer of Leighton Clarkson himself as well. But if we can certainly provide the service and quality from set pieces, I certainly feel after watching the highlights from the weekend, it's an area where we can really hurt Hearts. Does that concern you from a Hearts point of view after what you saw at the weekend, Graeme?
It's concerned me all season. And the worrying stat as well is that I read earlier on today is we've conceded the opening goal in 22 out of 35 games this season, which is damaging. And sometimes we fought back like we did on Saturday. But for me, Kelle Roos, I do like him, but he's too soft. Same with Toby Sibbick. They're just too soft, the centre-backs. They're too nice. Even the goal on Saturday, we conceded that first goal. Sibbick has no idea where Alec Gogic is. It's Alec Gogic. It's not a brilliant player. It's Alex Gogic, for goodness sake. Seriously. It's a decent header back and Shaughnessy finishes, but it's happened far too often. We're ball watching too often, and it's happened too often. I look back at that Hibs game we lost for Kevin Nisbet's goal. You've got 8 players in the box. Nisbet runs off about 3 of them and scores. It's poor defending, and it's happened too often. We're missing Craig Halkett massively, but the guy can't get fit, and we just need somebody in that centre back line to just take a bit of responsibility and just clear the ball. We don't have anyone that's doing that, so it is a massive worry. Anytime a team gets a corner or a free kick, I'm thinking we're going to lose a goal here, and most Hearts fans is exactly the same thing. And I think that's something that, whether it's Naismith or somebody else, needs to sort out next season, because we can't keep losing. It's the same goal we lose every single week. It's not like teams bombarding us with great football. It's balls into the box that we can't defend. And that's been an issue all season, and it's never been sorted under Robbie or at the moment under Naismith. I would like to think they're in that changing room saying, we need to sort this out because we can't keep conceding the same goal. But it happens every week, and it's getting really frustrating. It really is. The same on Saturday when I seen that goal. If even I hadn't seen the goal and I'd heard we were 1-0 down, somebody said to me, what do you think the goal was? And I said, ball in the box, we can't defend. That's exactly what I'm expecting now, because we can't defend.
Yeah. And I suppose, Calum, we've actually got that person that will almost take the defence by the scruff of the neck. We saw that, as you mentioned in the first part of the episode today, about Angus MacDonald almost stepping up to be that leader when all around him were not performing in terms of certainly the back line. And I certainly feel a lot more confident in our defence, and not only defending set pieces, but even when we're not performing at our best, that they're still going to, put their body on the lines and do their best. But in terms of us being able to hurt Hearts from a set piece, is there areas that you're concerned where Hearts could equally hurt us?
Our right-hand side of the defence, I think we saw Ellie Yuan do his job excellently. The only thing missing was a goal probably from his performance against Hibs. We're missing McCrory. When I first heard about the 2 million, I thought, oh, brilliant, that'll be great. That's fine. I'll take 2 million for a player like him. With Coulson coming in, he's not a right back, definitely not a right wing back. And if Hearts can get down that side and hurt us through likes of Janelli, whoever's playing, if it's Cochrane at left wing back as well, Barry Mackay, I'm concerned about that, absolutely. In terms of ourselves, defender, you mentioned McDonald there. Hopefully Pollock will be back on his game, because you see that a lot. I've called him, a sort of a leader of men despite his young age previously. So if he can get back to that as well, I'll be a lot more confident.
Yeah, well, I certainly think, Matty Pollock will probably thrive on the atmosphere. But actually, speaking about Ross McCrory, I'm sure Barry Robson said that he's hopeful that Ross will actually be fit for this weekend. But obviously, how fit he would be in terms of lasting 90 minutes, I guess, would remain to be seen. But any minutes out of him could be absolutely crucial. And certainly, I definitely share your thoughts in that right-hand side, especially if Ross McCrory is not fit. And Graeme, that could be quite a key, because Josh Janelli has been, certainly from an outsider looking in, a star performer for this Hearts side this season. But you've got Lawrence Shankland, who chips in with penalties, goals, and you've got Barry Mackay as well. And Calum mentioned Cochrane's availability. Of course, you said pre-recording that Alex Cochrane isn't actually suspended for this game. He is back available, but then will be resuspended for your trip to Ibrox.
Yeah, he got the 1 game ban for obviously sending off, the ridiculous sending off, typical referees. But because he had that accumulation of yellow cards, he's got another suspension, but it doesn't actually start till the Rangers game. Oh, joy. But yeah, there's no doubt Janelli's been fantastic this season. I think months and months ago, many Hearts fans like myself would have said, get rid of him, not good enough. But he's been one of our shining lights. Shankland, 26 goals this season, fantastic. I know there's a few penalties in there, but he's been a very, very good player. His link-up play is actually better than a lot of folk think. So there are players in that team that can cause problems. And again, I really like Utaro Oda. He's come in and done very well. He's quick, he's skillful, he can drive at folk, and he's given us an energy that we've probably lacked for a long time. Against Ross County and Celtic, he was great. Had to go off when Cochrane got sent off, but he's been very good. So there are players in that team that can definitely hurt that Aberdeen defence. I think I go back to that 5-0 game, and when Hearts went 4-0 up, I think me and many Hearts fans went, how did that happen? Nobody knew how that game happened, because Hearts were really poor in that game. But we do have threats, and being at home in a game that we really have to win.
Yeah.
Even if we win, it's 2 points. Aberdeen play St Mirren, which I think they probably will win. We've got to go to Ibrox. It's going to be very difficult. But if we can even cut the gap to 2 points, it'll be huge. But I've been saying for weeks, every game we play is massive. This one on Saturday is now huge, because if we lose that, it's done. We have to give ourselves a fighting chance, and we have players that can do that. I think if we score first, get the crowd behind us, we've got a chance. But if Aberdeen score first, from a set piece probably, then I would worry the fans might start getting a bit negative towards the team.
Yeah, well, I suppose, you mentioned the stat about Hearts and first goals. Of course, Aberdeen, in a game that they've gone behind this season, have not come back to claim any form of points. So first goal could be crucial, of course, this weekend. A 600 strong away end sellout. I'm assuming a home sellout in this fixture as well from that waiting list FC that will maybe turn up this weekend, of course, after failing to turn up for Ross County and Celtic games.
I very much hope so. I hope that it's sold out, because I will be fuming if there's empty Heart seats and we could have got more tickets and I'm sat at home watching it with fucking Theo Forbes. It better be a sellout. No empty seats at Tynecastle, please.
No. Graeme, you going along this weekend?
I wish I could, but I have family responsibilities, which mean that I can't go. And to be honest, if I see the result and we've got beat, I'll be glad. If we do get the result and I wasn't there, I'll be raging. But I'll be watching it either way.
And in terms of, you mentioned, of course, this is a game that Hearts have to win to have any hope of finishing third, or certainly keep the hopes alive, I suppose, because a draw mathematically keeps it alive. How do you think Stevie Naismith does approach this game? Is it go at Aberdeen from the start or build into the game? You mentioned what it's like at Tynecastle, getting the crowd with you. Do you expect Hearts to come out all guns blazing?
I think we have to. And to be fair to Naismith, the 2 home games he has done that. He's actually set us up very attacking. And we've hammered Ross County and played very well against Celtic. Probably the first time I've seen us actually have a go at Celtic for a long time. Even the 4-3 game at Tynecastle, we didn't really attack that much, but this one we did. So I think at home, he's got us playing a lot more adventurous and a lot more attacking. Mm-hmm. And he has to do the same thing. I wouldn't be making too many changes from Saturday. Obviously, Cochran comes back in. Atkinson will probably start at right back. Apart from that, well, Haring obviously be suspended for a ridiculous sending off.
Do you think he will be, though? Because obviously Hearts have appealed that red card, so...
Well, to be honest, given what happened with Graham Shinnie, I genuinely don't know what's going to happen with these decisions now. I've got no idea who sits in that panel, whether it's Bill and Ben, I don't know. But, I mean, it was never a sending off in the first place. It's a ridiculous sending off. And to be honest, the standard refereeing this season has got worse with VAR, which I don't know how that's possible, but it has. But obviously, if Haring's suspended, I hope Halliday doesn't play because I'm not a fan of Andy Halliday. He can stick to open goal in his other crap podcast. Probably, it might be George Grant in midfield. Again, George Grant at times has been okay. He can do a lot more, I think, under Naismith. So apart from that, I think he'll pretty much keep the front four the same. Ginnelly, Oda, Shankland and Mackay. I say numerous times that Barry Mackay in big games doesn't turn up. He has to turn up this time because this is a massive game. And I think being at home, I'm hoping that he will. But I think, as with any game, the first goal is crucial. If Hearts get it, if we've got something to build on and really have a goal, if Aberdeen get it, it's going to be a very difficult game if Aberdeen score the first goal.
Yeah, and I think that's right. If we get the first goal, it's something for us to hold on to because we're going to have to frustrate Hearts. And Calum, is frustrating Hearts going to be the key to us this weekend? As Graeme says, and certainly the way from watching that game at Tynecastle against Celtic, they were excellent in that opening half hour up until really the red card. Is it going to be a case of absorbing the pressure and looking where possible to frustrate Hearts and maybe commit the odd niggly foul to break up the play, slow down Hearts and get that crowd that, as Graeme said, it can be on top and behind Hearts, on top but against Hearts because they're not performing to how the crowd are expecting, as we said, in a game that really Hearts have to win.
I mean, yeah, we're actually going to have to be very organised and the structure of our defence, no matter how it shapes up, has to be perfect. For me, if McCrory's not fit, I'd like to see Richardson back in. We're going to have to look to frustrate them because, Graham's saying they're going to probably come flying out of the traps. With that front four as well, our defence will have to be on it from the off. But I do agree in that if it's not going their way, fans can get on top of the team at Tynecastle, and the atmosphere can become a bit tense and a bit edgy and a bit negative. So hopefully we can do that. We absolutely can't concede first because, even before I'd heard your stat, Glen, that we'd never earned a point from going behind, I can't even remember beyond this season with when we last came from behind to win anything. I've got no faith in that. And at the same time, if we get a goal, we can be very organised, resolute, and just hold on to that 1-0 lead. And if Duke is fit on the counter-attack, he provides an excellent threat. Certainly as a ball carrier, anyway.
And I suppose, Calum also asked Graeme how he expects Hearts to approach the game. Do you expect us to almost sit in that first 10 minutes? Or do you think we would maybe try and look to take the game to Hearts and put them under the pressure early doors to get the crowd on their side early? Because certainly at places like Tynecastle, you don't want to almost give Hearts that momentum, certainly with the crowd in the opening exchanges of wave after wave of attack.
That's where it's difficult, really, because we don't want to be too open and leave ourselves susceptible to conceding that first goal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't let them just control it and dictate it because, well, we lost 5-0 last time down there. So it will be difficult. I think we will be resolute and probably attempt to frustrate them. As you mentioned, the niggly fouls. The template for that is the Rangers game. I think we executed that plan perfectly. You could arguably say going into this game could use the same sort of template because it's away at Hearts. Although we are 5 points better than the league, they are a good team. They are a good team, and they, especially going forward. And I suppose, as you mentioned earlier, we need to make most of set pieces. They were awful, particularly against St Mirren defending them. Joe Shaughnessy doing us a little bit of a favour as well, which was fantastic. So we need to make the most of that and just make this game difficult for Hearts. Because even if we come out there with a point, that suits us perfectly going into a home game against St Mirren where we could potentially wrap up third.
Yeah, exactly. Just avoiding defeat this weekend would be probably viewed as good enough from an Aberdeen point of view. But all 3 points, of course, would be sweeter. But no matter how poor Hearts are defending set pieces, they've, of course, got Xander Clark, who very much came to Hearts' rescue at the weekend, probably ensuring they didn't drop that 1 point that they did gain. But Graeme, really good to have you on Red Tinted Glasses this evening to preview the fixture at the weekend. Of course, as I said, you started up your own Hearts podcast called the Heart and Soul Podcast. So for those of a Hearts persuasion that have been listening to this preview, or certainly any Aberdeen fans that want to hear the preview on your podcast, which is joined by a friend of ours, Greg Playfair, for this weekend, where can they listen to the Heart and Soul podcast?
So it is Heart and Soul Pod, a Hearts podcast. I've actually posted my Twitter thing to Calum in the chat there as well. So, but I usually post the links before I go live on air, which we're doing tomorrow at 7:00. And I actually have Greg joining me tomorrow for the preview or the review of the game at the weekend there, which will be fun. Talking about Peter Haring sending off, which I'm still raging about. But yeah, the link is there, and I usually send it out before I go live, so anyone can listen if they like.
And that's on the Twitter Spaces, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, good luck with that tomorrow evening. And thank you very much for joining us on the show tonight.
Cheers for having me, boys. Delighted.
Thank you again to Graeme for joining us on the show. A show that's covered the game against Hibs, where we got what could be a crucial point heading into this weekend. And then, as we said, looked forward to the game this weekend. We've even managed to avoid Calum ranting about Barry Robson not being included in the Manager of the Year nominations.
Very good point. A fucking disgrace, by the way. I totally forgot about that until you mentioned it. Not on. I know. I think the fact it wasn't actually at the end of the season has maybe plagued him. That's what I'm putting it down to, not the fact he wasn't here the whole season. Because if he finishes third, given where we were, that's my manager of the fucking season. All right.
Plagued him. Brilliant. And were you happy with the PFA goal of the year as well?
Oh, don't get me started on that. Was it nowhere near the best goal? I mean, yeah, nice finish and all that, big game, whatever. Not the best goal. I mean, two of Duke's could have been up there. Stephen Humphreys, I know Hearts fans are up in arms about that, scoring from his own half. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke, man.
Yeah, but we've come to expect it. So thank you very much once again for listening to our shite chat. Hopefully not too distracting if you've been listening at work or running on the treadmill, as I know some of you do as well. And if you've been out with a dog, hopefully it's helped that pass the time as well. So I think this Saturday calls for a big one. Come on,
I think that was actually too loud. I don't know if that's going to come across. Brilliant.